I am Professor Dr. Azim Jahangir Khan. I am a Diplomate American Board of Dermatology, Diplomate American Board of Internal Medicine, and I did a fellowship training in cosmetic dermatologic surgery from American Academy of Cosmetic Surgery in the US. I was in teaching actually at State University of New York at Stony Brook in New York prior to coming to Pakistan. I have been asked to give some humble suggestions and some insight into the aging process of the skin, as well as how do we train people in Pakistan and elsewhere. Now in Pakistan, after I came to Pakistan, my biggest wish was to establish a center of the same quality as we used to do in the US. So the same quality of treatment should be given, the same machines should be used, and the same quality of care in general should be imparted to the patients that we used to give in the US. So Alhamdulillah, by the grace of God, we have been able to achieve that, as we are the only center in this part of the world which has been accredited by American Society for Dermatologic Surgery. And you can look it up on their website and you'll be very pleased to know that we have Alhamdulillah met all the requirements of American Society of Dermatologic Surgery to train people in this part of the world under their umbrella. So whoever we train, from 1 to 2 years training, 1 year is for general dermatologic surgery, and the next year is cosmetic dermatologic surgery. And so a person can choose just 1 year of training or 2 years of training. In the first year of training, we will be teaching the young residents. Now, these are the people who have already trained in dermatology. So they are already sort of trained dermatologists in Pakistan. We don't want to take anybody who has not basic training. So these are already partially trained people who are trained in dermatology, but now we want to teach them the cosmetic medicine or cosmetic surgery or cosmetic dermatology in per se. So first year we'll be starting them with basic skills like how to evaluate the aging process, what aging process can be corrected and what cannot be corrected, what can be corrected with the minimally invasive things or non-surgical things, then minimally invasive surgery and the invasive surgery. So as long as the minimally invasive or non-invasive things are concerned, there are many things which have been used. For example, I have used PRP for more than 2 decades. When PRP was not involved in the rejuvenation, it was more involved in the wound healing. Since I did another fellowship in the US called the Wound Healing Fellowship from Northwestern University, which is the Ivy League, Alhamdulillah. And then I did another fellowship in wound healing at Stony Brook. My basic passion is how do wounds heal? And these are not the wounds. Actually, whenever we do the non-surgical or even the surgical intervention for the anti-aging, we create very minute controlled wounds, and when they heal, actually the rejuvenation occurs. Now one part of that is platelets. Now platelets release a huge amount of growth factors. So if we want to make those growth factors, that will literally cost us millions of dollars to make those growth factors artificially. Since growth factors already have them stored, we can release them, but that can be released by using a very accurate method by using pre-made kits. I mean, you can do when I was training, we used to make the PRP by ourselves, but that was a very tedious process because that was operator dependent. Now with all the new kits that many companies are making, and I like one particular company, but I don't think it would be nice to say the name, but Prisma is the one we use mostly because in my opinion that is one of the companies which has tried to calibrate it in a more accurate way, and that's why I like it. So the reproducibility of the result, one of the variables is which kit you are using, and since every kit is made by the company with something in mind that how many revolutions per minute it will require to settle the other cells, and then how are you going to activate the platelets for them to release the growth factors. So that has to be kept in mind from all my colleagues, that it should be a calibrated kit so that it would be less likely to give you the false result, in other words. Sometimes I hear from people that PRP doesn't work. So one of the, I think, less accurate science is PRP, because you are sometimes comparing apples with oranges. So it doesn't mean that the PRP per se is not effective. Probably we are not comparing apples with apples, and we are trying to compare apples with oranges. So if somebody is trying to use one kit which may or may not be, because what I have heard is that many companies are non-reputable companies are also making PRP kits. So I don't think that they have gone to the detail where they can accurately say that what kind of growth factors are released by how many platelets. And so I think we need to put in our heart and soul in this science if we really want it to progress. Otherwise it will fizzle down like many other things. So I would encourage that companies as well as doctors should put in a little bit more effort to make it a more accurate science than what it is today. The second thing that I'm asked to talk about my experience, my humble experience about the threads. Now, when I was training in the US, the first threads, I wouldn't take the name of the company, it was very popular. It was a Russian company which introduced the threads, and we were very excited about it, and we actually made some of our nurses volunteers. But the results were horrible, to be honest with you. I mean, it was very disappointing because it looked like, because these were non-absorbable threads and these were permanent threads. So after a little while, the skin will start to sag, but the thread would stay there. Sometimes it would spit because it is not the absorbable material. So sometimes the body's immune response would spit it. So we honestly were not very happy about it, and I stopped using it while I was still training because it was a boom and then it fizzled down very quickly. Why were we excited about the threads was primarily because I was trained in the surgical dermatology. So and these were very famous people, Emilio Bisaccia and Dwight Scarborough, who have written the textbook of dermatologic surgery. So according to them, because they were surgically trained and I was also being surgically trained, so we couldn't believe that something as little as Botox injection would be able to eradicate quite a bit of wrinkles from somebody's face. So it was just unthinkable. Similarly, we couldn't think that without doing a facelift, we could erase the nasolabial folds or marionette lines with the filler. So it was just unbelievable. But while I was doing training, these things were coming up, and they were the people who were actually just starting to do it, and they were some of the pioneers in the field. So I had the chance to learn with them while they were starting to do it, and they were doing it a little bit before I joined them as a fellow. So when they looked at the non-surgical options, which were not believed to be effective, they started to believe in it. So the same thing we got the same excitement about the threads also, but threads was a no-no. So thread was a little bit of a disappointment, and partly because we also felt that should they have been absorbable threads, the story would have been different, the outcomes would have been different, but we didn't have any absorbable threads at that time. So we stopped using the threads and we went back to our minimally invasive facelift, microliposuction. So we were very happy with that. Until recently, about 5 years ago, when the threads again re-emerged in the form of PDO threads, and then other materials have been developed and are being developed, which are a little bit longer lasting than PDO. But the beauty of those threads, that in my hands, I've been doing those threads for the last 6 years, I guess, since the inception, when they started to come out. So since I was already trained with the old kind of thread, the technique was same, but the material of the thread was different. Now this time around, I was pretty happy, to be honest with you. I have used threads made by different companies from different parts of the world, but I have been reasonably satisfied, to be honest with you, that these threads have not disappointed us at all. Why? Because number one, they are not permanent. So it gives us a little bit of a headache to convince people to get it done because they think everything is permanent and it should be as good as surgery. But at the same time, when we have to tell them that this is going to be semi-permanent or it's going to be a temporary effect, first they are fearful, but when I tell them that if something goes wrong for God forbid, at least you will not be stuck with the result. So that's the beauty of it. So I personally believe that anybody who wants to do a non-surgical intervention or even a surgical intervention, if something is reversible, I think we should try that first. For example, if somebody wants to have a permanent filling of a nasolabial fold or cheeks with the fat transfer, I usually recommend them let's do with the filler first, because the filler and hyaluronic acid filler, so that it is reversible at least. So if you don't like your new look, at least we can dissolve it. And once they start liking it, then we graduate them towards fat transfer. Now the beauty of the non-surgical treatments that I have seen in my career is that I started as a surgical dermatologist or dermatologic surgeon, and over the number of years, over the number of last 2 decades, what I have seen is that while we were doing like 3, 4, 5 surgeries a day, that has dropped down to like 25 fillers a day or 30 Botoxes and other non-interventional, non-surgical like threads and stuff like that. So the number of people who want to get these done has dramatically increased because nobody wants to go under the knife. And obviously with its attendant complications and risks involved with the surgical procedures, people are staying away from surgical procedures but going into the non-surgical. Now, I honestly believe that companies, and especially the good companies, should invest in science behind it rather than just creating a hype about it. And I understand that the marketing is necessary, but at the same time, we should involve the young doctors who are upcoming. We should assign them small projects, but which are very legitimate projects, which can actually give them sort of confidence that science behind every product lasts longer than the product itself, because you will keep on fine-tuning the products if it is backed by solid science. And the solid science comes not only from the lab, it comes from the doctors, reverse back, it goes back from doctors to the companies backwards also, that because when doctors are using some product and they think that these little tweaks can actually make the products better, the products do get better. Like we are using hyaluronic acid fillers, and there was a time when we were thinking that why cannot we use more filler in those parts of the body which need otherwise some implant, for example breast and calf and gluteus and stuff like that. So we are still a little bit, I know that there are some studies, but I think we can do more studies that what is the maximum hyaluronic acid burden that a normal body can tolerate or can handle without causing any problem. So I guess, and then there are many other upcoming interesting products that we can talk about, but the basic idea should remain the same, that all the products or every single product should come with a little bit of a science, which should be more than what we are doing today, honestly. And I'm a part of it too, because I feel that we are still deficient in some basic science, and probably not only in the basic science, that how do we grade the benefit. For example, PRP, when people talk about PRP, there are 2 schools of thoughts, and some people think that it doesn't work that much. But I think if half of our patients are saying it works and half of our patients are saying it does not work, there should be some reason that in people, if it's working, there should be some reason, and in people in which it is not working, there should be some reason, and we have not been able to sort of classify the patients in those 2 groups. So if somebody comes to me and asks me that what are the 10 criteria that you follow or you fulfill, and then you can be sure that it would work, or which are the 10 things that if I have it, I will have a fair idea it wouldn't work. So I don't have it, to be honest with you. And if somebody has, I don't know, I'll ask one of the company reps or some other companies that, you know, if they have some data, they should share it with their injectors so that they can know. And similarly, if you see that fillers wise also, we are sort of static in the last 10 years or 15 years. I mean, some of the fillers have come which are semi-permanent, but their problems have been semi-permanent also. So the safe filler development is still, I think, needed, and part of that is going to come back from the clinical side to the basic science. So we used to call it translational research in the US. So that needs to be encouraged in this part of the world, in Pakistan, where I see excellent, outstanding clinicians. And if we try to marry their clinical acumen with a little bit of grooming from the basic standpoint, in which they can do PhDs, they can do MPhil in basic science, biochemistry, molecular biology, and then we are trying to actually convince a couple of universities in Pakistan that we can start using MD PhD programs rather than just the MD program. So it will be MBBS PhD in Pakistan, and in England also people do it. But there is a less, I would say, interest in some parts of the world where the PhDs and the MDs, or PhDs and MBBS, they join together, and one person can do both, and then they can be an excellent clinician as well as the basic research scientist. Now, one more thing that I just wanted to share with you with a little bit of an excitement, and that is that another thread is being launched in Pakistan. It's called Asenure, and it's a PCL thread, which is a little bit better thread in terms of longevity of the thread. And so when we do PDO threads, when we compare PDO threads with PCL threads, usually you'll see the comparison being made that in terms of longevity of those threads. So I hope that you'll enjoy watching us do and train other people in Pakistan, inshallah. How do we train them on these threads? Because the technique of the thread is very, very important, and sometimes I see people dissatisfied with the product without knowing that this is their training that counts. So the same thread in two different hands can give you a different result depending on the quality of work that a clinician performs. So in order to avoid that gap between a very good clinician who inserts the thread in a very fine way versus somebody who does it crudely, we are trying to bridge that gap by doing some training workshops on a continuous basis. We have this institute Cosmetique where we are training American Society of Dermatologic Surgeries fellows, but that's a two years training, and not many people are interested in investing 2 years or 1 year. So when they want to do just the threads, at least we can do small trainings, and then we can train them to a level where we are comfortable that the product will be the good product will be as good as the good person who's going to place the thread. So good placement of the thread is very, very important, and we'll be working on that. And with that, I thank you very much for whatever little I have to share.